We're going to be talking community schools in just a few moments, but we thought we might bring you up to speed on just what a community school is, especially in the Brooklyn context. There it is, community schools. First slide here that I can share with you. Community schools are open to students, families, and members of the community. They're open before, during, and after school all year long. So they also focus on the needs of the whole child, whether it's their physical development, their emotional, social, and of course, their academic well-being. It's a whole 360 approach to schooling. And the school and community act in concert to help young people succeed. And they all realize they can't do that work alone, so there's the concept, community school right there. Looking a little bit deeper into an ideal community school, they would offer before and after school programs to help build on the success of the classroom experience that's also provided at the school. Now they offer medical, dental, and mental health services that are readily available to all of those stakeholders that we mentioned before. And parents and community residents participate in adult education and training programs, once again, that all help the community. Now, what this all boils down to is that the community uses the school as more than just a place to send your kids from the morning until the afternoon. It's really about the development and stakeholders working together to solve community problems. So that's community schooling in a nutshell. And now we'll get into the A block.
Right now, there are more than 150 cities around the country that are doing community schools in a large-scale way, from Newark and Philly to Evansville, Illinois, and Ogden, Utah, and of course, New York. We've seen a big rise in the number of community schools here, but now many of them face cuts. If funding is restored, will more reform be necessary? We want to welcome back Professor David Bloomfield from Brooklyn College and the CUNY Graduate Center, the author of American Public Education Law. Welcome back, David. Thank you very much for being on BK Live. We also want to welcome Andy Bowen, policy analyst from United Neighborhood Houses. Welcome, Andy. And Julie Stein-Brockway, director of program services at Center for Family Life. Thank you very much for being here, all three of you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you being on BK Live. Now, as Brian just pointed out in the slides, the ideal community school seems like a win-win for everyone in New York. David, why don't we start with you? What are your concerns when it comes to community schools?
Well, my main concern is that the de Blasio administration has fallen into a trap driven by state policy that poor kids are going to be congregated in certain schools. And we're going to then provide even greater services to those children, even though we should have greater diversity among all schools, and every school should be a community school.
Interesting. Julie, can we go to you? What are some of the concerns you've had with community schools? Please, go ahead.
So we've been involved in community school work for 3 decades at the Center for Family Life, and we're delighted that there is more funding and attention, but this is a long-term strategy, not a quick fix. And the big concern that we feel is that if you really want authentic community participation and relationship building, it takes more than 3 years. And right now, the cycle of funding from the state that we have, Community School Grant Initiative, is ending with just 3 years, and the Mayor's Initiative is also expecting to present results after just 3 years, and the long-term work of needs assessment and responding authentically with community strengths takes longer than 3 years.
Well, Andy, speaking to needs assessment, that falls right into your wheelhouse there. What sort of gains have we seen over this 3-year period, and is that even enough to get a true sense of the impact that community schooling, that's not even one, school career for a child?
Sure. So we haven't, we're ending the 3-year period of a state initiative, the Community School Grant Initiative, which is what Julie was referring to. We're not quite at the end of the Community School Initiative that New York City has started. Okay. We're at the end of year 2. So there's some overlap there. We have seen we just did a survey of Community School Grant Initiative schools, and we saw of those that we spoke with, 78% of them had seen increases in graduation rates and attendance.
Because most of these schools were the bottom of the barrel. Mm-hmm. These were the failing schools, sort of the last ditch. We're going to really throw a lot of resources to try to make something good come out.
Right, and then also with the city's initiative, you know, across these 130 schools, we've seen an increase of 5% in chronic or a decrease of 5% in chronic absenteeism. So we are seeing results, but just going back to what Julie emphasized, you know, the major thing is that we need to. This is a long-term strategy, and we just hope that everyone who is funding this can see that.
We'll get to funding in a moment, too. Julie, or anyone who wants to jump in, can you explain to someone who may not know the difference between a community school and a charter school and a public school?
I don't know that I'm the most expert on that topic, but certainly a community school can be in a public school or a charter school, because basically the idea is the relationship between the school and the community, and viewing the school as a resource to the community and vice versa. The community schools that we're involved in are in public schools that have a commitment to authentic participation of a community and to a problem-solving method that engages all stakeholders, parents, students, teachers, et cetera, together to look at the unique needs of the community and find the unique strengths and resources and opportunities to address those.
David, would you care to comment on the budget? The legislature invested $100 million in this year's budget for creating new community schools, and it did not renew funding for another smaller set of existing schools in New York, 12 in total. Will we see the funding expire by this time next year, David?
Well, this is the budgetary accordion, and you know, sometimes it's enlarged and then it's squeezed, and as the others have said, it doesn't allow for the kind of long-term planning that's required. What's happened this year is that because of a change in the definition of what a struggling school is, the state has withdrawn funding from schools that a year ago were considered capital S struggling, and because now they're not capital S struggling, even though they're still struggling. And we really have to commit long-term in a way that serves kids and not just the politicians in Albany.
So let's kick it up to the federal level then. If we're looking at these schools and we see that the way that the state and the city are choosing to disperse the money, there's all the talk about how America's schools, the schoolroom is changing, that the whole flip has happened, sort of, and New York is leading the way, educating kids who are closer to the poverty line and more children of color and language issues, all of the things that America's going to be facing, we're already there. So can we look to the federal level to say, okay, this is the New York experiment, this is what classrooms across America are going to look like?
Well,
put the money here.
This is the area of education law that I specialize in. There is no such thing anymore as No Child Left Behind. That federal law has been thrown in the trash heap. It's been replaced by something called the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, and that's what changed the definition of what states will now be declaring as failing or struggling or renewal schools.
Yeah.
So there is a federal role,
So we're
not
not
only
gonna get money?
monetarily. Well, we're going to be getting money. A lot of this is tied to Title I as well, but it's not going to be enough money, and the state isn't stepping up to provide the resources for these schools.
One of the things I was going to say that's so great about a community school strategy is that you're bringing resources to the table in the school setting. So for example, if we are in a school and partnering as a community-based organization, we have access, we can leverage state, city, federal funds that are separate from what's coming to the school from the city, and we can bring in the necessary services, medical, mental health, arts, enrichment activities, leadership development, adult education, et cetera, and it's not coming out of the same budget, but that strategy allows multiple stakeholders to leverage resources, and that's another win-win, I think, about this kind of thinking collectively, thinking whole child, thinking whole community. That I think there's some solutions that relate to the long-term funding strategy that would maximize what does it mean to be in a partnership, and how do we leverage the partnership from all directions to sustain this work.
So what are the arguments against community schools then? Not to throw it to you, but you're carrying them out. Because if we can sort of pool resources, make it one-stop shops, does it deplete resources for other parts of the community where if you already have a mental health place, you're gonna get less money kicked in? Like, why isn't this just writ large?
This is, I mean, it's a model that's catching on clearly.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of experimentation in education reform over the last, 15, 20 years. And I think we're landing on something that is exactly the right idea. Thinking about sort of the genesis of the community school model, United Neighborhood Houses, which is where I work, is organization of settlement houses, that sort of 19th century model of holistic services that are guided by what the community needs, serving people across the age span. Community schools are really an extension of that same idea. And it's what's pleasing for us is to see that, proliferate. So I think as we see more and more places, experimenting, seeing what works, seeing that the long-term benefits are real, which Center for Family Life has definitely seen over your very long experience of doing community schools. I think we're going to see that, this is not a zero-sum game. It's not taking anything from the neighborhood. It's leveraging community resources, using them smartly, and responding to community needs in a way that's going to bring families and children along.
I think what people have to understand is that community schools are really the way schools ought to work.
Exactly.
Today,
In all neighborhoods, even in resource-rich neighborhoods.
Absolutely. There was a recent NPR segment on the need for mental health services in schools because children need not just poor children. Children need mental health services. Today's New York Times, so at least online today, is about schools where so many of the kids are living in shelters. These are homeless kids, and the turnover of kids coming and going during the course of the year, even in the month of May. And so schools experience that, and it's schools and children which need those expanded services, not just the 3 R's, but also healthcare, literacy programs for their parents, other social services, which really is at the bottom of increasing academic performance. If that's what we want, we need to do it across the board and not just by limiting the services in the building.
Julie, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
I was just going to say that it's such the schools are underutilized public facilities. And so the whole idea of getting, in there from 3 to 9 p.m. or on Saturdays, Sundays, the summer, these, in the settlement house, we consider ourselves a settlement house, and I'm happy to be part of UNH, but we've always seen our work as located in school buildings because they are public facilities. And there's so much economies of scale when you bring those services there. It doesn't take it away from somewhere else. It just utilizes a beautiful physical structure or structures that need attention, and then we can advocate for that. But it leverages the opportunities into one space, and we can sort of all piggyback on one another, and families can come and get a variety of needs met in one setting. And over time, it's those families that are going to be the leaders of determining what is needed in their community. I think that speaks to what we want for the future.
That's exactly where I was going, because I'm wondering, I imagine that in a place where there is a larger tax base, and there's when you think of brownstone Brooklyn, the needs are different than in underserved communities where basic needs aren't being met, or there's a lot of they go by the school lunch formula, where the kids who can qualify for school lunch versus places where people, frankly, can afford to send their kids to private schools. So each community decides sort of what the need is to be filled there.
Yeah, we've seen, I think one of the really fabulous things about this model is that you have schools meeting up with, nonprofits like Center for Family Life or New Settlement in the Bronx, places that have real community organizing experience. And so, you can really get people who know people in the community, organizations that have deep roots, and can draw upon, years of advocating for various various causes, use that knowledge of the community to guide what kinds of needs your school should be meeting.
I also want to emphasize that it's not a panacea. You don't wave a magic wand and say, poof, you're a community school, all kids are going to be above average. We see what's going on right now at Boys and Girls High School, where, in fact, there's some tension between the principal and the community partner that came in. This really takes, and it's why the budget is important, because those kinks have to be worked out over time if we're really going to have successful partnerships. And so it doesn't just happen because we have a good slogan.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have. We'd like to thank you three for coming and talking about community schools. Please come back again sometime. Excellent job. Thank you all very much for being here on BK Live. No, thank you.
Thank you.